on that. So just, I guess, the first thing to address is, what is ATA certification? So ATA, the certification exam, is it's a test that translators can take to demonstrate that they have a certain level of proficiency when translating. It's available in specific language combinations, either into English or from English into another language. So English is always involved. What the exam is not, it is not an exam for beginners. The exam was written and intended for somebody who's a sort of mid-career translator who's been working for a few years and has some experience. It's a difficult exam with a relatively low pass rate. I think the average across all of them is 20% or under. Oh wow, that's nice and bright.
All right.
So, preparing for the exam is important with such a low pass rate. You want to take your time and get ready for it. Hey, Marco.
It was Marco. Almost there.
Perfect. All right. Well, that one's yours.
And the remote is right there.
All right. Can we put up the right presentation?
Oh.
That might have one.
I'm a beginner. Next push right there.
All right. So there's my disclaimer. I'm not a grader. My overview. So when you pass the exam, you translate from one language into another, and it only applies for the language pair you've taken your test on. These are currently all the languages it's available in. Like I said, either into English from one of those languages, or from English into a whole another list of other languages. There is a process for adding new languages into the exam, but I would suggest going to the ATA or asking the ATA about that if you work in one of the languages that isn't listed. But if you take the exam and you pass it, there are a lot of benefits to being an ATA certified translator. One is it's a very widely recognized credential. The ATA has worked very hard at increasing their brand recognition for certified translators, and a lot of clients actively look for certified translators. So it's a good way of, when you're soliciting new work, to get your foot in the door and get them to listen to you. Another one is when somebody goes to the ATA and goes to search directory, and in the search section, they can click a little box that says, I only want to see certified translators. And so that will exclude everybody who isn't certified. So it also sort of highlights your profile within their directory. If you pass the exam, you automatically become a voting member. So, there are a lot of benefits to being certified. So I think it's a good goal to have. What it is not is a guarantee that you will get work. You can be certified and you can be very skilled, but that doesn't mean you'll automatically get work just because you're certified. It just means you might be slightly more likely to get noticed or get a response when you send messages out. The exam itself is a 3-hour-long proctored exam. So you have to be prepared to sit and work for a time. The format is that it has 3 general audience type passages, and you have to pick 2 out of any of the 3. You get to pick which ones, which is a change from how it used to be in the past. Each passage is around 250 words, and So knowing that you have to translate 2 passages, it means that you've got about an hour and a half to translate, edit, proofread 250 words. Because you've got to split your and manage your time wisely. So that's something. It is an open book exam. You can bring any book you want. And if you're taking the computerized exam, there are some resources that you can access online. For example, you can use Lingui, you can use WordFinder, you can use Google. You have limited internet access. What you can't use is email or forums or anything that allows you to ask another person. And there is a whole list, and I'm pretty sure I put that link on the handout, of all the things you're allowed to use and not allowed to use during the exam. One issue with the exam is it is expensive. The cost to take the exam is $525.
Non-refundable. Non-refundable.
Non-refundable. So whether you pass or fail, you know, sometimes they'll let you switch to another sitting, but you never get your money back once you have signed up to take it. So with an exam that expensive, you want to make sure you are ready to take it when you take it the first time. So that leads to the next part. How do you prepare? This is a difficult exam with a low pass rate. So my best advice is plan ahead. If you want to take the exam, start preparing at least 6 months in advance. You want to have time to research the exam. You want to you know, the ATA puts out a whole list of resources. For example, all of the Into English grading standards are published and available on the ATA website. You can read through it. It's a 75-page PDF of everything the graders use to decide what type of error it is. There's a lot of really good material that you can use to prepare for this. You want to take a practice test. I'll talk about this a little bit more. The ATA puts out a practice test. So you just want to give yourself enough time to decide you want to take it and start preparing. So what are you going to do? When you're preparing for an exam, one of the best things you can do is read a lot in both your source language and your target language. You want to get familiar with the different types of text that might appear. Generally, the ATA exam uses text written for a general but educated audience. They might be essays. They might be something that appeared in a newspaper article. It might be some sort of expository piece explaining something. And it covers a wide variety of styles and topics, and so you just want to read a lot in both your languages and get familiar with the types of languages and patterns that get used. You want to read everything on the ATA website about the exam. You want to know how the exam works and how they pick their passages, and all of this information is there. The ATA puts a lot of information out there because they want people to be successful.
Do they publish the previous year's topics or exam essays?
No, they do not publish exam passages. If you want to see an actual retired exam passage, that's what they use the practice exam for.
And they do grade it and they explain
Yes,
exactly what
and
mistakes
I'll
are.
explain that. But the passages are meant to be a challenge. They're not meant to trick you, but they will put in things like false cognates or false friends, things that look like it might be one thing, but is actually something very different. So they put in challenges that a seasoned translator, someone who's been doing it for a couple of years, would recognize, but a beginner might miss. And so that's one of the reasons why you want to read and read a lot and get to know your languages very, very well. The next thing you can do is practice. Go out and practice translating under test conditions. You know, set yourself a set amount of time and go out and find a passage that you think might be similar to something. Go out and take a newspaper article, for example, or a paragraph from a newspaper article, and practice translating it. Set yourself a goal of maybe I'll translate one paragraph every week, just to get used to the flow of doing it. So the more you read and write and practice your translations, the better you'll get. And you'll also get to know how you work when you're working on something like this. So when you're doing the computer exam, for example, they give you your passages printed which is different from how it is when you work in general on a computer. So you want to get used to looking at a printed sheet of paper and typing separately. So you want to get used to how the exam is going to be and practice at it so that when you're actually at the exam, it all seems somewhat familiar. All right, so a strategy for when you take the exam is you want to know your workflow. You want to analyze the text. So what I mean by this is read through everything. You have your passage, read through it. Sit there, underline any words that you might not be familiar with. And then that'll help you figure out what passages you might want to do. For example, if you look at a passage and you're underlining every 3 words because there's a lot of unfamiliar content, that might not be the best one for you to translate. So figure out, read through everything before you even start translating. Underline anything that's unfamiliar that you think might be a challenge or might be a little bit tricky to phrase correctly in your target language. And then before you even start translating, go through and look up what those words are and start creating a little list of possibilities. And then when you're ready to sit and translate, you have a lot of this work done and you can work a little bit better, and it's not starting and stopping and starting and stopping as you look things up. So your writing will flow a little bit better. You want to go back and reread what you wrote. It's very easy to get typos or accidentally skip something, especially when you're typing. So you just want to go through and look for any sort of careless errors. You want to read through it, revise it, change how it flows, make sure it reads correctly, proofread it. One trick to make sure you're not accidentally skipping the line, say there's a word that repeats somewhere, and sometimes, I don't know if you've had this experience, I have it sometimes just reading the news, where you're reading and suddenly you look up to check something else and you look back down and you skipped a line. It's very easy to do this. You can use like a ruler, even just the straight edge of another sheet of paper to go line by line down to make sure you don't accidentally skip something. So, and the best thing you can do to prepare for the exam is to take the ATA practice exam. So the practice tests, you order them, you have to pay for them. If you're an ATA member, they're $80. If you're a non-member, you can still take them, but they charge you a little bit more, which is $120. And they are actual retired exam passages that have been used in the past. So you get to see exactly the type of text that might appear on the exam for your specific language pair. You take it at home, so using whatever resources you have. It's a good idea to try to take it under simulated exam conditions. That way you have an idea of how successful you might be. And then when you're done, you send it back to the ATA, and they will send it to an ATA grader who will grade it as if it is the actual exam. But unlike when you take the exam, you get your practice test back with all the grading marks on it. So you get to see exactly what was being marked. And you can use that to figure out where you should focus on your own studies. You can see what types of errors they're marking, whether they're sort of minor and you need to just proofread more carefully to make sure you don't have spelling mistakes, or whether your punctuation doesn't follow the style guide the graders are using, and you can set yourself a mental note, I need to use this comma, or should be a semicolon, or whatever, because they will mark those things as errors on the certification exam. So it can either be something blatantly serious that says you're not ready, you need to practice more. It could just be these little ticky-tacky things that you need to just set a reminder, okay, this is where my weakness is. So I highly, highly recommend taking the practice test.
Sarah, right?
Yes.
Okay, do they give you a specific grade or just they mark the errors?
So the way the grading works is there are different error categories, and each one is assigned a number of points for serious. So if it's a little error, it might be 1 point. If it's a more serious error, it can go up to 8 points or 16 points off. If it's a very, very bad mistranslation that would completely impair somebody understanding what the translation is meant to say. So when you get your markings back, it will also give you an idea of how ready you are to take the actual exam, because they'll tell you whether you would have passed or failed that particular passage.
But do you need to register to get In order to get the practice test or order it, do you need to be registered to get the regular test? You
No,
don't-
no.
So you can go.
So you can take as many, there, I forget exactly how many you're allowed to take a year, but you can take, you can order, I think it's up to 3 practice tests a year. I think that's what it is. That's what it used to be. I didn't double check that one. But you can order several practice tests each year without registering for the actual exam. So if you're just starting out and you want to see, $80 is a lot cheaper than $525. It is a lot cheaper. So it is well worth taking the practice test.
Is my understanding also that you have to be a member for a year before taking it?
Before taking the actual exam, not for the
That's
practice
what I'm
test.
saying.
Or maybe even not. I don't, they've changed the
They changed
required,
that?
they've changed all the eligibility requirements. I think the only requirement now is being an ATA member. I don't think you have to have been for a year. So, you know, I cannot stress enough how useful and helpful the practice exam is.
Did you take it, Sarah?
Yes, I did take it. And something useful that somebody may not know is if you've paid for a practice test in the past and you didn't take it and send it back in, you can contact ATA headquarters and they will upgrade it so that it more closely matches the current exam. Say you ordered one back when they had, you know, a general passage, a scientific passage, and a financial passage, and you have one of these specialized passages, you can send it in, they'll send you a new practice test without charging you anything more. They will upgrade it for free. So that's something that I discovered that I thought was useful.
I ordered a practice test at one point and forgot to take it, and it just sat under a pile of papers for like a year and a half, and I was sure they wouldn't take it at that point. But I did the practice and sent it in, and they graded it, you know, no questions asked. So
Mhm.
I think technically there's a 1-year turnaround time, you have to take the test, but they're real flexible about
But
it.
yeah, ATA is really flexible about working with, and that's why I said if you have one and you didn't take it or you forgot to take it, just contact ATA headquarters and they will work with you so that you can take it. But otherwise, I really, really recommend it. All right, so one other thing about the practice test before I move on is this is why you want your 6-month window for preparing, because it takes time for them to send your test to the grader, get it back, and send it back to you. So you want to allow enough time if you're taking the practice test to get your results back, analyze your own results, and figure out where to go. And you might want to take a second one after you work for a while to see how you've improved. So just something to keep in mind. All right, so and then exam day. I cannot stress this enough. Every passage comes with a set of instructions. Read the instructions. It will tell you what type of text this is supposed to be. It will tell you the intended audience. They might tell you it's for a set of high schoolers, or it might tell you this is for a business community. It will give you an idea of the type of register that you are supposed to be using. For example, it will also, if there is a specific set of terminology that they think will be especially tricky, they will give you the translation for that little bit. And they'll say, if you see this, translate it as this. And if you don't do it, it's an automatic error. So read the instructions and follow them. If you do not follow your instructions, they can say, well, you didn't follow our instructions. And you'll be marked off for that. So that's why I say, first tip, read the instructions. Second one is, again, like I said before, read all of your passages. You'll have 3. You only need to translate 2. So read through them, like I said before, underline anything that's unfamiliar or that you think might be a challenge, and it'll give you an idea, a very quick physical. You know, you're looking at your 3 sheets of paper with the passages, and one has a lot of underlines or highlights or something, and the other is fairly clean. It gives you a really good, quick visual way to decide which passages you might want to attempt. So you want to read everything through before you start, because otherwise you might get halfway into something and then go, oh, I'm really not doing so well on this one. I should have chosen something else, and you've wasted your time. In the exam room, with a lot of people typing on a keyboard, if you're doing the keyboard exam, which most people do nowadays, it can get a little noisy with all the clicking keys. You can bring some headphones that'll cancel the noise, or earplugs or something, just to sort of isolate yourself so that you're not distracted by what else is going on in the room. You also sort of want to set up your area so that it's comfortable for you to work in. If you normally work at home with an external keyboard, a full-size keyboard that says Posata, bring your keyboard. You can bring a separate keyboard, a separate mouse. You can do all of that as long as you can set it up on the table in front of you. You can do it. One of the last times I was taken, somebody brought a paper holder so that their papers stood up in front of them like this so that they didn't have to lay it down flat. There's just these very little simple tips and tricks. One of the Chronicle articles was setting up ergonomically to take the ATA computerized exam. It had a lot of really good advice. And it was the person who wrote it was the person who had brought something to stand up the paper. And it's like, well, that's super simple. That means I'm just looking back and forth. I'm not looking down and up and down and up. It makes a difference as to how comfortable you feel, and that could affect your performance in the end. So, just things to think about. Make sure, set yourself up for success. Do what you can to make yourself comfortable and be successful. All right, so some very common mistakes for people taking the exam, and this is information that I've gotten from webinars put on by other graders who see these, is omissions, accidentally skipping a line or missing a sentence or something. So double check everything carefully to make sure you didn't leave anything out. Misspellings or typos. Double check your spelling. You're not allowed to use spell check when you're taking the exam. So you want to make sure you have a good monolingual dictionary in whatever your target language is. So if you're not sure how something is spelled, you can double check and look it up. Punctuation, you want to make sure you're following whatever the standards are for the language you're translating into. And what they're actually following will be available on the ATA website. And again, not following the instructions. That's a big one. People forget to read them all the time. Yeah. Did you have a question?
Do they provide a computer or do they provide?
So you you bring your own laptop.
Okay, so how do so if I were to bring my laptop and I'm doing it in Word, the spelling is...
Okay, so the way they set it up, this is something I should have mentioned before. So they have specific programs that they want you to use. If you're using a Windows laptop, it is WordPad with spell check disabled. If you are on a Mac, it is Text Editor, also with spell check disabled. So those are the programs that they want you to, which is just the most basic word processor you can have. So you want to make sure that you know how to, one, find the program and open it. And then the other thing you need to know how to do to take a computerized exam is how to use a USB key, insert it into your computer, eject it safely so that the files don't get scrambled. And you also want to know how to save as a .txt file, a .text, as well as a PDF file, because they want both. So what they do is they give you your passages on paper, they give you a USB key labeled with your exam number. So they assign you a number for you as the test taker that's sort of randomly generated for that test that day. So none of the graders know who you are when they're grading it. And you so you have this labeled USB key that you put on, you type, you save your files to this USB key. You're not allowed to save to your actual computer. And then you give the proctors your USB key when you're done.
So they're not concerned about format?
No. They want you to, you can do bold, italic, and underline. That you can do, but, margins, all that. They just want you to match the paragraphs. There's no crazy formatting or tables or anything like that. It's usually just the text. And speaking of grading, so once you're done taking the test, everything is done with a number. Your name appears nowhere on anything, and then ATA will go back later and match up your number to figure out which test belongs to. But every single exam, when you're taking the full exam, goes to 2 separate graders who grade it independently. And if they come up with a different result as opposed to pass or fail, it goes to a 3rd grader who then verifies and sort of merges everything together to get the final decision. and they grade according to a point mark system. So they decide a category. I'll show you the flow chart in just a sec, and so on. And so the most number of points you can get off before they decide you failed 100% is 45. Once they've hit 45 points, they stop grading. They won't even finish because by that point you failed so badly that it's not worth it. So this is the flow chart that they use. So you can see it's sort of hard to read, but you know they start as, does it affect understanding, or is it negligible? And you can sort of go down from 0 points all the way down to the absolute worst, where if your text as a whole is not usable because of your error, you get 16 points off. And this is also available. So you have different types of errors, and they go all through this every single time they find something to decide how many points. So it's very standardized how the graders work. All right. And this is the most recent sampling of pass rates for all of the various language pairs. And you can see that some, like Arabic and English, has a 9% pass rate.
How much?
9% for Arabic into English.
Arabic into English?
Arabic into English has a 9% pass rate. So for some language pairs, it's extremely low. On the other hand, Russian and English has a 28% pass rate. So, you know, it varies, but overall, it's usually around 20% or so as the general for all language pairs. And this is,
Spanish is
16?
12.
yeah, Spanish is 12%. Spanish to English is 12%, and English to Spanish is just under 12%. So it's difficult. Part of the reason the pass rates are so low is you do get a number of people who say, oh, I'm bilingual, I don't have to study, I'm going to take it and I'll pass. So this is why preparing and understanding how the exam is formatted and how it will work will help you to pass this exam. All right, my last slide is just, you know, some sources that I use when putting this together. So a lot of this is also on the handout, you know. So the first webinar that's up there is a free webinar that you can take if you're an ATA member. You can just go, it's an on-demand free webinar. It's older, it was put out in 2011, before the exam format had changed. That was back when the exam was still handwritten. So some of the advice is a little outdated, but the tips given for how to study and prepare are still very valid. Other than that, you know, you've got everything available through the ATA, of which there is a lot of information. Anybody else? Yes?
How long, I mean, if you pass for how long is it valid? Like, when do you have to take it again?
All right, so if you pass the exam, you don't have to take the exam again. What you have to do is maintain your ATA membership, and then every 3 years you have to submit what's called a continuing education points. It just means you take webinars, you do something to maintain your active status as a translator. You can attend the ATA conference, that gives you 10 points. So if you go to the conference once a year for 3 years, you've got all your points. You get points for going to conferences, you get points for belonging to an association, like our lovely association here, you get points for taking webinars. You can give points for giving a school outreach presentation to a bunch of middle schoolers, or elementary schoolers, or high schoolers if you like talking to kids. There are all sorts of different ways, and there's a lot of information on the ATA website on how you can get these points and how many points. So they make it as easy as possible to get the points you need. So you just have to submit every 3 years saying, yeah, I've been doing these things.
You don't take the test again?
No, you do not have to take the test more than once. Once you've passed it, you've passed it. And the only reason you might have to take it again is if you don't submit your continuing education points, or if you let your ATA membership lapse for too long. Say you stop working for 3 or 5 years or something, and then you come back, they say, well, what have you been doing? They might say you should take it again. But in general, once you've taken it, that's it. Yes?
You underline the importance of course, taking a professional test through them. I heard people stating, maybe, you know, just to simplify, that this was a board exam, like architects taking, for example, licensed counselors and social workers too, or attorneys. Can you
That would
address
be, that would be a mischaracterization
Thank
of
you.
what the
Can
exam
you
is.
say?
It is, I mean, I'm not a representative of ATA or, like I said, a Grammar, so this is my disclaimer. But as an ATA member who's taking the exam, it is a credential.
Right, exactly.
That is what it is meant to be, is it gives you hours.
Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
I'm just wondering from people in the audience, can anybody say that when they became a certified translator, how it impacted their career? Did it help you find more work or different kinds of work or better paid work?
I get offers for work all the time from people who say I found your name on the ATA website. And so if they were looking only for certified translators, that's how they find it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Could you guys clarify the difference between somebody requesting a certified translation versus translation from a certified translator?
Yeah, okay, so the certified translator is somebody who has taken and passed this exam. A lot of clients get confused between the two. Here in the US, there's no official requirement to be a certified translator in order to certify the accuracy of a translation. Usually this is just a statement that the translator puts out, and when I do it, for example, I take it to the notary and have them notarize the statement saying that I am swearing that this is true and accurate to the best of my abilities and knowledge. But again, you do not have to be a certified
Not yet.
translator.
Not yet.
Well, there's no right as of right
Not
now.
Okay.
There is
Can I
no
explain that?
no
Because
rules.
I'm a certified physician for my different housing. What she's saying is you could put your name in certification, whatever it is. It's gonna certify that you're doing it.
Yeah,
That's
so
your-
if you
it's
wish,
not important. To the best of my abilities.
Mhm.
Is there a legal document that requires the translation to be done by a certified?
Usually that's
Translator.
something that the client is imposing, saying, I want this to be done by a certified
The client
translator.
decides,
The client decides, I want this level of professionalism, this level of quality. I want to use the certified translator, so you must use a
so
certified
the
translator.
immigrate, for example, an immigration class might require that, or, I mean, I don't know the client.
Whenever you're involved in any document that is a legal document, they might require that the translator be a certified court interpreter, so that they have the guarantee that there's something that an external higher authority has said that you know how to translate. That's the only thing that they can ask.
Yeah.
A bad translator can go to the notary and say, I did this to the best of my
Yes, they could, which is why there's the difference between a certification statement for a certified translation and a certified translator, someone who's taken the exam. But yeah, there's a lot of confusion, and pretty much the only way to solve it is through client education. You have to sort of teach your clients the difference between a certified translation versus a certified translator.
But a good translator that's not certified can also do an
Yes.
excellent translation. So
Absolutely,
how-
and there are a lot of really good translators who are not certified. They've decided it's not worth their while to do it, either because their languages aren't available, or they've just been doing it for so long that they don't see the value in going and adding because they have plenty of work. So it's just all depends on what is good for you and your own business in the end. Anything else? All right, then I'm done.